some of these reactionary politicians within this society about people of the Christian faith being massacred in Nigeria. So that's what we're going to address is the malicious lies about a so-called genocide or massacre of so-called Christian practitioners. So we're glad that you're here to join us for this episode. And we also, of course, want to acknowledge the struggle of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We are certainly aware that this is November, and in the Western Hemisphere, November means that there is this constant effort to subvert the true history of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So we refuse to let that happen. And we initially said we would be doing a program next week about that, but we're actually, due to the events in Sudan, are going to focus on Sudan next week. And the week after that, we will certainly be talking about the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So we definitely are thinking of their struggle in their efforts to liberate these lands. And we encourage them to stay strong and stay vigilant and to not be discouraged because the struggle is intense. It's going to be difficult. It's going to require us to hunker down and be prepared for war because that's what we're engaged in. So we encourage them and support them, and as always, are willing to do whatever we can to assist in their struggle. And of course, our African ancestors are the only reason why we are still here today, and we owe everything to them. Certainly, most importantly, we owe dignity. They gave us the gift of dignity, so we owe that gift to future generations. And the best way that we feel that we can express that dignity that our ancestors gave us is to recognize who we are as a people. We're not Americans. We're not Black people. We're not Black Americans. We're not any of that nonsense. We're Africans who were stolen from Africa, who are fighting for the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. That's who we are. And if that's not who you want to be, then you go do whatever the hell you want to do. But we are going to have victory in Pan Africanism, and it's going to be a socialist victory. And that's what we're fighting for. That's who we are. That's what we're fighting for. And we make no apologies for that and no stumbling over our words. We are Africans in America fighting for African liberation, and that is centered around our mother, Africa, and her liberation. That's who we are. That's what we're fighting for. And that's what we're going to accomplish. And so, this program, Our Ancestors' Voices, it's sponsored, one of many programs sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan African political party with a base in Africa. So the primary reason why I'm in this organization and have been for 41 years and have worked very hard over that 41-year period and will continue to work very hard for whatever time I have left is because what I've seen this organization accomplish is what its title says, to struggle to build that mass consciousness all over the world. So I've seen it. I've traveled all over the African continent, all over Europe, the Caribbean, and all over this backward cesspool empire. And what I've definitely witnessed time and time again is that we have done the work and continue to do this work to build this Pan African fighting force, whether people are speaking French, and I've been in those areas, whether people are speaking Portuguese, I've been in those areas. Whether people are speaking Spanish, I've been in those areas. Whether people are speaking English, obviously we're in that area right now. Whether people are speaking Swahili, I've been in those areas. Whatever the case may be, where African people are, we are there organizing around this objective of Pan Africanism. And that's the reason why I'm still here in this organization. It's not a vision. It's not just a vision we have. It's not just an idea. It's not a hope. It's not a dream. It is an actual reality. And it's a reality that you will never see on CNN or CIA network, but it is a reality that will continue to build strength and capacity, and it'll be the turnkey to bring us the freedom and self-determination that we're so in desperate need of and that we're fighting for. So our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is displayed on the page here if you're looking. Hopefully you are. And this book provides the blueprint for how we see Pan-Africanism coming into existence. And that work to do that involves what Nkrumah talked about in the handbook, organizing and uniting all genuine revolutionary Pan-African forces who agree that the definition of Pan-Africanism is that it's an objective. It's not an ideology, it's an objective. And that objective is defined as one unified socialist Africa. So all the groups that agree with that, or at least open to have discussion about that, we're engaged in ideological struggle, principal ideological struggle to bring about that unity. And I'm on a plane here in just a few short weeks to go home to Azania, uh, better known by its colonial name, South Africa, to do work for the APRP there. Not going to go to no damn safaris, not going to sit around in bars and look at Europeans. I mean, I unfortunately I can do that here. Going to do work to build our party and our people for revolution. So that's the work that we are doing, you all. And this is the reason why I'm here and will continue to contribute to this work as long as I have breath in my body. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my ideological and biological daughter, the recently anointed Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started, I will turn it over to the good doctor.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you. All right. So, greetings, everyone. Hello, hello. We hope that you are well and we hope that you are ready to talk about Nigeria today. It's very important that we continue to think about how the framing, the propagandized framing, is very much embedded in how we are developing our thoughts, how we're informing other people about these conversations. And I would say, most important, it is also influencing the attitudes, the beliefs, the things that we are developing to think about. If we have not yet been able to travel home to Nigeria, that often continues to deprecate the problem a little bit more, because not only do you not have a foundation yourself, you're not at an organization that's working for justice, you're not increasing your political education, and you've got these three kind of situations that are pushing against you, to where other people who know nothing about Nigeria are still in a more higher position where they have authority and we respect what they say. And so, because of that, they're able to teach us things that are not even true. They're able to teach us things that are not even based on reality. They're able to mold our thoughts, you all, and tell us what to think. And we think, as Kwame Ture put it, we think that we're thinking for ourselves, but really they are telling us what to think. And we think that it's our thought, but it's really their thought that they have put in our minds. That was a rough paraphrase, but that is what the quote was that he meant when he said that. And so we have to kind of think more about this and really kind of break this down. We've talked about colonialism a number of times in the seminar, so it shouldn't be new news that we understand that this is a very big entity, a systemic oppression, if you will, a system of oppression that literally eradicates in a group of people's ideology, their culture, their beliefs, their practices, their rituals, their routines. It takes away their land, it takes away their power, it takes away their dignity, it takes away their ability to have an identity, it takes away their ability to promote their identity, it takes away their ability to worship and spiritualize the way that they are tuned to do that. It takes all of that away, you all. So colonization is very harmful to any group of people, and we can talk about Nigeria and definitely go into more depth with that. But what you need to understand is this has been a continuous conversation over and over again. I'm thinking about indigenous comrades, for example, who had talked about the harm of colonization to the point where they were forced to go to Catholicized schools. Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, they were forced to go to these schools. They were forced to learn Catholic practices and religions when that's not the native way. That is not the indigenous way. And so we see that taking place with that. Excuse me. We already know that Islamophobia exists. We already know that Islamophobia is perpetuated and endorsed by capitalism, white supremacy, like you name it. And so, like, we have to just kind of think about that. You all, we have to legit like think about that and frame that in this way, especially because it's relevant and it's relative to today's conversation. Very much so. We can't make a mistake about it. European colonization in Africa and anywhere else, the purpose of that was to take everything from Africa, including people, to take everything from Africa, including people, to where the material resources were done in a way that was systematic. This image that you see on the slide, which I hope you are looking at this slide right now, I hope you are looking at it because it does not get more clear than that. Looking at this slide, you can see literally how the Berlin Conference, the outcome of that was played out. You can literally see it's color coordinated. So you can match the colors to understand who was colonizing which part of Africa. For example, if you look at the green, you can see that that was primarily from the French. If you look at the red, you can see that that was primarily from Britain. If you look at the orange, you can see it's primarily from Portugal. If you look at the yellow, there were some parts of Italy that had colonized and taken over. Belgium continued to terrorize and haunt the Congo. I mean, we could go on and on. And even the gray part, which represents the independent. But this is where we can kind of see, like, literally how this was broken down, you all. And again, like, this explains why we have so much issue when it comes to identity. We have so much issue when it comes to colorism because certain groups had more essence of European in their DNA and in their blood. And so they might have a lighter skin tone. And therefore, there might be this development that there's some hierarchy or, you know, them thinking they're better. We can talk about the class system a little bit. We can also talk about tribalism. I mean, all of this, you all of those things are designed to make us be divided as African people. I really hope that that makes sense to you. None of that is designed for us to unify and come together. And this is exactly why we do this seminar every weekend, because we're trying to help you all see that's exactly why we need to be resisting against it. The work that was put in with developing this organization was based on unifying Africa, not further dividing it out, not further separating it out, not further isolating it out, but instead bringing it together. One of my favorite sayings by Kwame Nkrumah is he was working up until the day of his last breath to build a United States of Africa. That is what he wanted. That is what Muammar Gaddafi wanted. That is what Sekou Touré wanted. That is what any African revolutionary that we have talked about in this seminar space, I guarantee you that's what they wanted, especially if they were able to further enhance their Pan-Africanism even before their last breath. So I would even include Malcolm X in that conversation. I would include Dr. Martin Luther King, right? So we can go on and on with thinking about that. This is why Theodora Gomes fought to repel the Portuguese out of her homeland because she wants that. This is what this means. You also, we have to continue to think about what it means to resist what the propaganda is trying to get us to do. The propaganda doesn't want us to come together because if we come together, then we're going to be too powerful and we're going to be organized and we're going to push them out. And that's not what they want. This is why they're okay with the fact that we embody these political terms. We embody that we're Black. We embody that we're African American. We embody that we're African Black, whatever, like on a good day. I don't know. Like we embody that. We literally embody that. That's something that we need to think about. That's something that we need to really isolate and kind of break down because if you're using colonial terms, then how are you going to be educating your brain to help you see a different way? How are you going to be implementing a different way if you're not starting with the language change, if you're not starting with the fact that language needs to be different? You know, you heard Baba Jamu say earlier that we are paying homage to our indigenous comrades of the Western Hemisphere. And I continue to embrace that I am very comfortable saying on Thanksgiving to anybody, people I work with, my students, like whoever. I don't care at this point. And I don't care if people feel uncomfortable. I don't care anymore, because what I think about is the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere are uncomfortable. That's what I think about. The indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere deserve to have their land back. They don't deserve for people to just make plans in the coming weeks for a big feast to take place. Meanwhile, thousands, and I do mean thousands, of indigenous lives were not only lost, but there was no remorse, there was no humanity, there was no acknowledgement for it. It was literally for the same topic on this slide today because of colonization. So the very least that we can do is to embrace that and to resist it and to fight for all the ancestors who fought and whose lives were lost. They were taken from us unnecessarily. And so we kind of think about that. And this is the example I'm using where we can start to embed how we need to change the language that we're using. That is a great way for us to practice that. That is a wonderful way for us to start to relearn what the colonization has undone, right? And to decolonize and decenter colonization so that we're in a better position to be thinking about how we need to be making other changes, how we need to be embedding other things. How else can we be resisting the system? How else can we be pushing back? How else can we be enhancing our knowledge around these different topics, whatever that looks like, right? You can't even compare the early 15,000 years ago economic system of slavery to colonization and the slavery in Africa over the last 500 years. If you were to think about the old slavery period, with the economic evolution in Africa and everywhere, then the most recent system of colonization and slavery was about building the wealth of Europe and the industrial capitalist world. That would have never been without exploiting Africa, you all. It had to be with the exploitation of Africa. My favorite room, and Baba Ajamu will probably, roll his eyes when he comes back to speak on his part, but my favorite room in the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, because the rest of the museum, you should go check it out, but it's not as powerful as the first room. The first room to me is worth it, and you don't even need to necessarily spend more time through the rest of the museum. You should spend majority of your time in that first room. But the first room, they have you watch a little video, blah blah blah, and then the doors open to the left and you walk in and you hear drumming on the recording. I've talked about this before on the seminars, and it's a room dedicated to the transatlantic slave trade. Because of course you can't talk about the civil rights movement, you can't talk about Black Power, you can't talk about the Black Panthers or the student nonviolent, you can't talk about any of that unless you talk about the transatlantic slave trade. You have to. Literally, that's literally like putting the cart before the horse, right? So we have to kind of think about what that looks like, because when you walk into this room, there's one particular um, it's not a statue. There's one particular entity, for lack of a better term, when you walk straight in, and it's probably like 12 or 1 o'clock as you're walking in. You hear drumming. You literally can see on the ground they have different maps connecting to different parts of the world where resources were being taken. People were exchanging people, Africans specifically, for goods that they could use for ingredients to cook with or other ingredients to build other materials and things like that. So you can see the points of connection on the ground as you're walking. There's also somewhere in that room, there's an image of the image you see on the slide here with the Berlin Conference. To the right, there's some statues of enslaved Africans, and you can hear the chains on the recording. So you hear the drums, but you also hear the chains clinking as the people are moving and walking, right? There's all this stuff. And this straight ahead, this entity that I'm talking about is very small, so you'll miss it if you're not careful. But if you're like me, then you're studying every scope and inch of that room because you're trying to understand, like, is this accurate? Is this correct? And also you're trying to take it in because it's a lot. It's a very powerful room, and it's going to move you and potentially make you, express some emotions if you're lucky. So there's a tiny little piece on this entity, and it says, literally, America was founded on the backs of Africans and Africa. Literally, like there would be no America. And I mean like the America today, post-colonization of indigenous people. That's what I'm talking about. There would be no America of that stature, where not only have they colonized the indigenous, but they have kidnapped the Africans and they have exploited Africa. That's what that statement is saying on that entity. And also, as small as it is more powerful than the entire museum. It really is, because that kind of leaves a foundation and allows you to kind of see, okay, So this is really where it all started. And really, if it hadn't been for the cheap labor of African people, this would have looked a lot differently. This would have looked a lot differently, and Africans would be treated differently to this day had that not been the case, right? So it's really important to kind of think through that, you all. I mean, that's like boom, like that's big. Like we have to really kind of process that a little bit and think about that, because this whole idea of colonization, neo-colonialism, like these things are not new. And in both cases, it's a circumstance where power has been stripped away from a group of people, and they are still being exploited at the expense of them lacking power, whether you're defining colonialism or whether you're defining neocolonialism. So we have to think a little bit more about that, because it's not up for discussion. This is why the work is so important. Next slide. And this is why we have to think more about how we can not only build structures that can resist those two systems, but this is why we need to be knowledgeable about what those systems mean, the definition of them, and then also how we can be doing the work, whether you are traveling like Baba Ajamu to actually go and do the work, whether you are supporting a Pan-Africanist organization, if you are in an organization yourself, if you're increasing your political education. I mean, we've talked about several different ways that you can do that. With the upcoming of Unthanksgiving, maybe you can shift your focus of donating to a Pan-Africanist organization, and maybe you can donate to some of the indigenous organizations. Maybe it's the American Indian movement. I'm sure they would love to receive your donation, because times are hard and they're trying to maintain the work that they're doing. There's several different organizations that you could look up that you can tie in, especially if you go to our website and we have a sibling tab. But maybe for November, you can donate some of that time or money to an indigenous organization. But this is what the work looks like. So, in terms of thinking more about that, we have to continue to do this work. You know why? Because colonialism is continuing. The effects of colonialism are still very much relevant and active today, right now. Still very much relevant and active today. If you don't believe me, I strongly encourage you to make some connections between the post traumatic slave disorder and mental health with African people today. Connect the unconsented experimentation on enslaved African women and the impacts of reproductive justice today, and how we're still not being valued or listened to today in medical spaces, how white supremacy is still relevant and present in medical spaces today. I will go to battle with you. So you got to be ready if you're going to dispute that, because I will go to battle with you on that. Like we have to think about how this is connected, you all. It's not by chance. It's there. It is right there. And you can't say that what has happened to the African people, what has happened to the indigenous people, what has happened to the Palestinian people, anybody who's been colonized, you can't say that their colonization, the experience of being colonized, you can't say that that does not have mental health impacts, physical health impacts, economic, social, emotional, like that. You can just assume that it is going to have that. When you strip someone of their identity, when you tell them they cannot be who they are supposed to be, you all, how could it not impact that? If you don't know who you are, then how do you know how you're going to navigate this world? How do you understand how you can agree with things and not agree, because you don't even know what your stance is? How do you understand what you want to do in this world? How do you understand how you have a right to contribute? How do you understand that you need to contribute? If you don't even understand what your position in this world, if you don't understand that you matter, if you don't understand that you have a place and therefore you have a responsibility, how could any of that be not impacted? I don't understand how we don't understand that. So we need to like really think about that. Like really, really think about that, because it's critical. And this is explaining a lot of why oppressed people, colonized people have some of the worst outcomes when it comes to maintaining jobs, when it comes to finding housing, when it comes to securing loans for transportation and mortgages. Like all of this is connected, you all. It's all connected. It is all connected. So we need to be responsible when it comes to resisting the propaganda that is being pushed and shoved down our throats. We should not be trusting US imperialist or European media anymore, because we have done enough seminars where we have convinced you, or we have tried, where that's not trustworthy information anymore. That's not a credible source. That is not a source where the information is coming from an evidence-based standpoint. So why are you still listening to it? Why do you still take it with a grain of salt? This is why we're pushing that, because we need to understand there are manipulating ways of getting information to where only what they want you to know they will share with you. So this is why you have to investigate yourself. You cannot simply rely on them. If you're going to get information from them, that's cool, but make sure you have a critical lens where you can synthesize it, where you can check it out, make sure that you're cross-referencing, because 9 times out of 10 it's not going to be based on reality and truth. It's not. If you and I have not gone to Nigeria yet, why do you think the colonizer would go? The colonizer has been to exploit the resources, yes, but not because they actually want to get a lay of the land and understand what's really happening. So instead, they get to craft their own message that's not based on truth because they haven't been to see what's actually happening. And even if they have, they're not going to share that information with us, because then that would reveal that they have sinister intentions. That would reveal that they have malicious intent. It would reveal that they are not trustworthy. That's why we have to be smarter than that. And we have to know that this is not acceptable. More importantly, we have a responsibility to protect our nation, to protect our African nation. We have a responsibility for that. So, just in thinking about Nigeria, especially as it connects to everywhere else in Africa and across the world, the colonial system was built and maintained upon controlling Nigeria's political, economic, and social reality. As a result, people in Nigeria were denied access to education and skills to govern themselves by the British. Does that sound familiar? It should, because that's what happened in other parts of Africa. It's what happened in Cuba before the socialist revolution. It's what happened to the indigenous people. Like I was saying, the only education that they were afforded to have was this colonization framed education from a Catholic standpoint, not the education that they truly were seeking. That was denied to them. So again, like, this is how you deconstruct an entire system and population of people. You all, that you take their land, you take their right to be educated, you take their right to maintain and to pursue higher education, and you make it very difficult for them to be able to facilitate how they can develop any kind of society where there can be, structures and policies governing things of that nature. Then you have complete chaos and anarchy from them, and so then you're in a position where you can literally decide how those things happen. And that's what that means. That's how that breaks down. And so just understanding the master's plan is going to be very beneficial for us, because then we're in a better position to fight back. As I prepare to close, I'll just point out two more things. You even had the divide and conquer that was fomented between the ethnic groups, like the Hausa, the Yoruba, and the Igbo. And this is a standard playbook that was used by the colonizers all over Africa and everywhere else. This is why I was speaking to earlier with the tribalism. And then last but not least, even the picture on the left is the British military commanders in Nigeria commanding Nigerian troops. And this illustrates the focus on systemic internal violence and control by Europeans. So just kind of taking all of this in, you all, we see this British military commanders that are in Nigeria telling these folks what they need to be doing. And so just pulling all of that together. And of course, that makes sense because we talked about colonization having control over political, economic, and social reality. Well, that doesn't mean that military is left out. That means that military is the biggest thing that you take control of first, because then the people can't fight you back, right? So we kind of have to break that down and make that piece by piece. So in closing, you should pick one indigenous of the Western Hemisphere organization to support this month financially, or offer your volunteering time, give your time to them in some way, shape, or form, and continue to increase your political education. Pick a new indigenous organization that you know nothing about and research them. Learn more about their struggles and how you can contribute to helping our indigenous comrades get their land back. Thank you, Ashe.
Uh, Obrigada, Asante Sana. Thank you very much, Midasi. And we want to just get into these capitalist lies about Nigeria today, right? I mean, you see like these serial liars, these US politicians, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, Graham Cracker Williams, whoever they are. All of these people are nothing but liars, nothing but criminals, nothing but corrupt thugs. And these are the type of people who have been speaking out making these claims that there's some sort of massacre against practicing Christians in Nigeria. I mean, these clowns, buffoons, and idiots, they couldn't find Nigeria. I bet you if you put a gun to their head and told them they had 10 seconds in front of a map of Africa to find Nigeria, they couldn't do it to save their lives. They couldn't do it. I'd be willing to bet money that neither of these idiots could do that. So this goes to the point Shakura was just making, that when we base what is worth talking about, when we evaluate what is worth us focusing our lives on based on what low life scum like this are talking about, that is the living example of colonial thought in progress. That's exactly what that is. We shouldn't be looking to these people for anything about what we want to do with our lives. We shouldn't be basing what we think is important on anything these people are saying and doing. What we have to be doing is basing what we do every day on what needs to be done, what the right thing is to do. These clowns and buffoons, they're disposable. They're here today. In 10 years, it'll be some other crackers and graham crackers that look just like them and sound just like them, but it won't be them. So it's not about them. It's about what do we need to be doing? And that's why it's important to understand these occurrences when they happen. So these US politicians are claiming this massacre is happening. The breakdown of Nigeria is that northern Nigeria is primarily Islamic. It's where, in some of the areas, particularly the rural areas in northern Nigeria, there is even Sharia, Islamic law that is practiced on the ground. The southern part of Nigeria is in large part people who practice Christianity. So about 50% Muslims live in Nigeria and about 30% practicing Christians. And then the other 20% are people who practice traditional spiritual beliefs like Ife or Yoruba, or in the Caribbean, it's called Santeria. And these are traditional African forms of worship. Here in this backward ass country, they call Ife or Yoruba, they call them uh, voodoo. There's no such thing. There's no dolls that you stick pins in. That's racist Hollywood. These are legitimate forms of spiritual worship that were in Africa long before, Christianity and Islam and these other forms, Judaism, came to develop and get firmly planted on the ground throughout Africa. All of them serve a purpose, but it's important to understand that piece. Now, that makes up the traditional beliefs make up for the other 20%. So that's the basis of what exists in Nigeria. Now, the imperialists are blaming uh, groups who are identified as Muslim groups like Boko Haram for the current violence in Nigeria that's happening. And Boko Haram is supposed to be like the ISIS state in operation in Africa. And if you know anything about Boko Haram, they've been engaged for a number of years in Nigeria, about at least 20 years now. They've been active on the ground in that region of West Africa. And the propaganda that imperialism continues to put out is that the reason why there's an AFRICOM program where there are between 75 and 100 US military bases in Africa, a program that started under the George W. Bush regime and then really proliferated under Barack Obama's regime and then continues under Trump's regime, where these military bases are established. And they have a large one in Lagos, Nigeria. They have one in Kano there in Nigeria. I've seen it when I was there. And so they have that. And they say that the purpose of these military installations there is to combat terrorism, groups like Boko Haram. And what we would say to you to start this part of the discussion is that you can't point to any sizable reduction in Boko Haram activity in Africa over those 20 years that they've been in operation there. So what the hell are these 75 to 100 US military bases and their personnel actually doing if they're saying they're there to stop quote unquote terrorism? That's not why they're there, is the point I'm making. They're there to engage in counterinsurgency measures against resistance, like what's happening in the Sahel with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, what's happening in Guinea-Bissau with the PAIGC and the Tara coalition trying to bring revolutionary politics to Guinea-Bissau, what's happening in the Horn of Africa with Somalia, what's happening there, what's happening in the Sudan and the Congo, what's happening in Southern Africa. That's what the U.S. military bases are there to engage in suppression, working with Zionist Israel to engage in repression of political uprisings that are driven by this anti-colonial mindset that Shakura was talking about. So, in order to create cover for that, U.S. imperialism is putting out these narratives that, well, Christian people are not safe and they're under attack. So we should examine that. We should study that. We shouldn't take their word for it. And all of the sources, and I'm not advocating any of these sources. Because if you understand how to do research, the way you do research is you look at any number of sources and you contrast and compare them. And based upon that, you look for logical trends. And that's how you come to an independent conclusion. So you don't just listen to what the BBC says or what the CNN says or MSNBC. You do a myriad of research. You contrast and compare a number of sources and you look for the trends and you create an analysis that makes sense from that. That's how research happens. So, according to a number of world sources, whether you're talking about the United Nations, the African Union, or groups like the International Society of Civil Liberties, and many others that I spend my time looking at, what you'll find is that since the year 2009, because that's where I started to do my research some time ago about, what's really happening in Nigeria, what I found is that there's no source that is claiming. That's why you look at so many different sources. There's no source that is claiming that any more than about 2,000 people who are so-called practicing Christians have been killed in Nigeria since 2009. Right? That's 16. That what is that? This is 2025, so that's 16 years ago. Right? By the same token, during that same period, any number of these sources confirm that between as low as 30,000 and as many as 50,000 practicing Muslims have been killed during that same period. So obviously, we're not talking about any genocide against practicing Christians in Nigeria. That you have to be a damn fool to believe, and damn fools believe that because they don't know how to do anything except go by what scum of the earth like these people in this picture tell them, or people like them, or even people on the Democratic Party side, because we're not advocating any. They're all crooks and criminals as far as we're concerned. They're all slugs. They're all a bunch of crackers. And if they look like us, then they're graham crackers. They're all crackers at the end of the day. And so we're not in favor of none of them. But what we're saying is that you got to develop an independent approach to coming to your conclusions and stop relying on all these goddamn criminals to tell you what's happening in the world, because a criminal will always only tell you what they want you to believe to create cover for their crimes. And that's what happens, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, whether it's the roaches, whether it's the spiders, we don't give a damn. They're all on the side of injustice, enriching their pockets at the expense of the masses of people. So there's no Christian massacre in Nigeria. But there's certainly something happening in Nigeria. All these people being killed. There's certainly something happening. So, what is that something? And that's what, we have to really dig down and find out where the real conflict in Nigeria is actually happening. And just like the Congo or Sudan or any one of these places, and if we, talk about the Congo quickly by comparison, there are all these same scum who would tell you, well, the problem in the Congo is corruption. And yeah, it's there's definitely the problem, but it's not the people that they're blaming for the corruption are not the source of where the real corruption is coming from. There are over 120 militia groups currently operational in the Congo today. And they're all coming into the Congo from neighboring Rwanda. that CIA child, Paul Kagame, who's the president of Rwanda, is allowing all of these militia groups to stage in Rwanda and enter the Congo to cause conflict. And the reason why they're causing this conflict is so they can get to the resources. The Congo is the most resource rich area in Africa, which is the most resource rich area on the entire continent. That is an irrefutable fact. There are more natural resources in Africa than the rest of the world combined. And the minute you understand that, then you'll understand why there are 50 million Africans in the US, 100 million in Brazil, and why we face police terrorism in Brazil, why we face it in the Dominican Republic, why we face it in Germany, why we face it in Canada, why we face it in the United Snakes of America, why we face it in Nigeria, why we face it everywhere we are on the planet Earth, is because they have got to keep their foot in our neck, because that's the only way they can ensure they have continued unfettered access to all of these resources. Apple has to have access to the cobalt in the coltan in the Congo. Uh, Samsung, Motorola, they all have to have that. Well, when we talk about Nigeria, we have to talk about it's not a ethnic conflict, it's not a religious conflict. For thousands of years, the Hausa, the Uruba, the Igbo have existed side by side without any significant problems occurring. We have thousands of years of history where we can document that and show you that. So why has it just been an issue in the last 60, 70 years where this has been something that has been untenable in Nigeria? And again, it's the same problem that we always would tell you is a primary problem in Africa today, and that's neocolonialism, where the colonizers, the British, are no longer physically in Nigeria. But before they left in mass in 1960, they had ensured to establish a system of governance in Nigeria, like the example we showed you in the picture of the military in the previous slide, where they set up an apparatus that would ensure their interests even after they're gone. That's where the neo comes in, because now neo-colonialism dominates in Nigeria and all over Africa. The Europeans are not physically there, but the system in place is designed to serve their interests. The people who activate that system and sustain that system are there to represent the interests of international capitalism and imperialism. So you take, for example, the government of Bola Tinubu, the president of Nigeria. His entire purpose, the entire purpose of Tinubu existing, is to serve the interests of imperialism. He has one job, and it's the same with every president in Africa. But Tinubu has one job. His job is to ensure that the masses of people in Nigeria are not capable of getting in the way of Shell and Chevron in their efforts to viciously exploit the oil reserves in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria has some of the best oil reserves on the planet Earth. According to the oil analysts in Nigeria, in Sudan, in Somalia, in these places, the oil reserves are so rich, quoting the oil analyst magazines that I reviewed for years now. They say you can stick your quote. This is a quote from them. You can stick your hand in the ground and pull out the oil and almost immediately put it in your gas tank in your car. It requires very little refining. And that's what these oil companies want, because that's how they maximize their profits. That's how the system works for them. So Tinubu's primary responsibility is to make sure they have unfettered access to these oil reserves in Nigeria and that they face very little opposition. Now, if you know anything about the history of Nigeria over the last 30 years, you know that the Ogoni people in the Niger Delta have been creating hell for these oil companies, sabotaging their oil tankers, causing them to explode, doing everything they can to sabotage their illegal and immoral oil operations in the Niger Delta throughout Nigeria. And so these projects like AFRICOM are in existence to sabotage these efforts by folks like the Ogoni people, the people you see in the picture there, the Africans in Nigeria who are pointing out how these oil companies have no regulations, no oversight. They thoroughly sabotage the lands to exploit these oil reserves, and they create ecological disasters that will impact the people in Africa for generations to come. And this is what these goddamn people do over there every day. And this is why they have people like these neo-colonial leaders in power so that they can ensure that there's no opposition to them getting to the resources. That, you all, is the real conflict in Nigeria. And these goddamn bastards sit up there on TV every day. Well, the problem is they're killing Christians in Nigeria. I hope you have a damn heart attack and drop dead tonight, because this is the type of thing that creates so much sabotage and confusion and turmoil and trauma for our people throughout the African world. I hope you have one tonight. If you think, oh my God, how can you say that? How could you not say it? After 500 years of this kind of terrorism being directed at our people and at all of humanity, how could you not say it? God, the hell yeah, I want my enemies dead, just like they want me dead. They want me dead, and they do everything they can to make sure that we're dead. And I'm supposed to, oh, I can't, the hell with you. I'm going to say it every goddamn day. I hope they drop dead from a heart attack. And I want us to organize effectively so if a heart attack doesn't get them, we can get them. God damn it. That's exactly what we want to do. Because they do this by doing nothing to stop multinational corporations from returning to the interior in Nigeria, drilling this oil, and doing nothing to stop the decrease in available land and resources for the people due to this colossal theft of resources by capitalism and imperialism. Royal Shell Oil, that's Shell, and Chevron and the others, and their historic exploitation in Nigeria has is continuing to get resistance, as I mentioned, from Africans in the country. And this is what they're concerned about. That's why they create these lies as cover to attack people. They can attack people like the Agoni people, and they can call, oh, we're stopping terrorism in Nigeria. No, you are the terrorist. You are the person that's creating the terror in Nigeria and all over Africa. And this is why we have to, be aware of what's going on. We cannot take their word for what's going on against our people anywhere on the planet Earth. And I know for you folks that are here, that's why you're here, is because you want to try to get some tidbits of information that can help you get a different perspective. So we appreciate you for that. But we got a lot of work to do, because we can't just take the information for ourselves. We have to take it, build on it, and expand the efforts to engage in proper political education so that our mamas and our daddies and our siblings and our friends and our coworkers and our neighbors can come to understand these issues and understand the core issues behind it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you have family and friends. You have neighbors, you have coworkers, you have people that believe that Christian practicing people in Nigeria are being uh, attacked and there's a system of genocide against. They believe that. So that's where our revolutionary organizing work is necessary, to explain these conflicts and to give context to them and to give history to it and to talk about how colonialism has evolved into neo-colonialism and to talk about the tactics they have in place today to ensure that their interests are primary and represented, ensure that the masses of African people continue to get nothing. That's what's going on there. So the truth pill, you all, the thing that we have to use as our primary weapon is, for us, we're fortunate. As we mentioned every time we talk to you, we have on the ground work happening all over Africa. And so we have comrades on the ground in Nigeria who regularly share information on questionable sources that illustrate what's going on there, just like we do all over Africa. And so I don't even watch NBC or CNN or CIA. I don't even watch that. And I got all the information. I don't watch none of them. They can't, what can they tell me? They can't tell me a goddamn thing. I don't go to 50 Cent and Diddy to get information about what's happening now. They can't tell me a goddamn thing about what's happening with African people. I don't go to Beyonce and Jay-Z to get my analysis of what's happening in the world. I mean, that's some crazy ass shit right there that you think that those people, if I want to become a rapper, then I'll talk to 50 Cent. I'll look up E40. I'll talk to these people, Lil Wayne, and I'll get recommendations. Drake. I'll talk to these clowns and buffoons about how to become a better lyricist. But I'm not trying to be a lyricist. I'm not going to be a lyricist. I already am a different type of lyricist, a more important type of lyricist. And the type of lyricist that I am, they can't tell me a goddamn thing about how to do that work. So we got to understand that. We have our sources, our revolutionary sources, honest sources that reveal to us the mad scramble to continue stealing from Africa. And for the US, the motivation is always resource theft. And they will always use religious persecution as a cover for resource theft. The entire situation with occupied Palestine is a primary example of that. It started with the first Zionist conference in Basel, Switzerland in 1897 to create a Zionist state. And they discussed at that conference, convened by Theodore Herzl, who himself said in his own memoir, you should read it, I've read it, in his own memoir, his own life story, that cracker said that he did not even believe in God. He didn't even believe in God. So, how do you go from stating officially that you don't believe in God to establishing a religious state based on Judaism? You don't. And so that's why the establishment of the Zionist state of Israel, they used the cover of faith to justify the theft of land from the Palestinian people. It's really just that simple, you all. I know that they got all these other confusing things in there, and some of you are confused because you don't have, you haven't been able to dig through all that nonsense. But what I just said, that's really what it is. They're using faith to justify the theft of land from the Palestinian people. Semites are African, Asiatic, Arab people. They're not Europeans. They're not Ashkenazi Jews who have ethnic history in Poland, in Romania, in Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Germany, France, Britain. These are not the people who were in Egypt in 1200 BC. These are not the same people that were there doing that. This is irrefutable history. Moses was not a European. He did not speak any European language. Is it Moses the prophet of Christianity? He didn't, Judaism, these world faiths, he didn't speak any European languages. He spoke Ugaritic. He didn't even speak Hebrew. His mother did. There's people who have, this evidence is highly documented, y'all. This is not speculation and opinion. So this is an example of how they always use faith. Do they use it here? They had to bring Christianity to the Western Hemisphere because of the savage Indian people here. They always use faith to cover their lies, to steal the land, resources, and the people. And why would they stop doing that? Because they've been doing it for hundreds of years and it continues to work. You know people who claim to be people of faith who believe well, the state of Israel needs to be protected. Well, America is the greatest country on earth. We brought Christianity. This is a Christian country. You know people who believe that. So why should they stop doing that? It's a very effective strategy for them to continue to use this question of faith to justify theft, murder, and destruction. And the only solution to that is we have to get better organized. We have to get better organized. And until we can do that, you all, they will continue to be able to use whatever lie they want. And you may not believe it, but everybody around you believes it. So what the hell good does it do if you don't believe it, if we're outnumbered by this reactionary negative propaganda on a daily basis? The solution is that we need you to get to work. Don't just come on here and listen to us and criticize. Well, they ain't saying nothing. Okay, do better. The best day of my life would be when you come out with something that's better than what we're doing right here. I will be your chief promotional person, telling people to listen to you. Well, don't you do it? No, I stopped mine because theirs was better. Because I'm all for the truth getting out. It's not an ego thing with us. So if you don't like this, do better. We need more voices. We need you to write. We need you to contribute. We need you to make your contribution. That's how we get out of this, you all. It's the only way that we get out of this. So we want to thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. It's not the fact that you want to find out something about Nigeria. That's very important. It's very special and it's very appreciated by the African people who are the recipients of this oppression. So thank you for showing up today, and we want to invite you back next week. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this program, what's on the screen is an error. We're not going to do healthy alternatives to the colonial so-called holiday because this is the holiday season in the capitalist world. So we don't have to do this program next week. Because of what's happening in Sudan, we want to do a program on Sudan next week. So what you see on the screen is not correct. We will be talking about the current situation in Sudan next week. And we'll do the program on alternatives to colonial so called holidays the week after. So join us every week for these programs. And the QR code in the upper left hand corner, the red and white one, you can access all of the APRP programs that are designed to engage in political education. This is just simply one of them. There are a number of them. So scan that QR code and you can get information on the others as well as this one. And then we do have the Forward Ever Shop. And I know a lot of you will you'll be buying presents for people if you're not doing it already. And if that's your lifestyle, if that's what you're doing, what I'm going to tell you is at least spend your money and do that while helping the revolution. So we have a Forward Ever Shop. You scan that QR code. You can go to the Forward Ever Shop. You can buy hoodies, t-shirts, and other memorabilia that have revolutionary Pan-Africanist slogans on them. And the proceeds go towards our work on the ground in Africa. They don't go towards me going to Africa. I pay that out of my pocket. They go towards the work of our organizers on the ground at home in Africa who are doing this work to build up this revolutionary Pan-African capacity in fighting for source. So please do that. And then Hood Communists, I just mentioned we need you to write. Write. Make your contribution. Start a blog. Reach out to me. I'll help you learn. I'll help you walk you through the steps on how you start a blog. Do that. Build up an audience. And then start writing for publications like Hood Communists. We need more people to do that. You don't have to agree with us. It's not about that. We're not that shallow in our thinking. You could have any type of perspective that's about advancing forward human progress, and your views are welcome. Because what we want to do is line all the views up and have people have a smorgasbord. They can take their pick of what they want to do. I am not concerned about whether you want to do what I'm doing. I am concerned about whether you do something. That's the bottom line. And every Thursday here in Sacramento area, if you are here, come out. And if you're not, tell people we have community self-defense. We had so many people there last week. It was amazing and incredible. And it's every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. here in Sacramento. The address is 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. Cottage like cottage cheese. 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8. You don't need to register. You don't have to enroll. You don't have, we're not, this ain't no capitalist thing. We're building community. So all you have to bring is your mind being open and ready and your body being open to engage in techniques that could save your life intellectually because you'll have the knowledge to see through the okey doke, save your life physically when these fascists and these other people who are for empire try to attack you and create harm for you and your family. So please come out. And if you don't want to come out, tell people so they can come out. All right. And then join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aaprp-intl.org. A lot of people join the party listening to this program. Please continue to do that. Tell some people you can go there, put your name in there. You can do that work. And then Burkina Books, the bottom right, the QR code, the black and white one, that's for our AAPRP work on the ground throughout the Sahel region in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. We're buying books to revolutionary literature. Walter Rodney, Frantz Fanon, Amilcar Cabral, Secretary, Kwame Nkrumah. That's what we're doing there. So become a monthly sponsor and then buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. By next week, I'll have a QR code for that up there. But unfortunately, you can only get it through Amazon. We're using the Master's Tools for Liberation. 100% of the proceeds from my book go towards buying supplies and work, anti-fascist work, which I'm heavily involved in. So support these struggles, get engaged. We can only go as far as you're willing to take us. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your evening.